All right, I'm getting the okay from our tech host to begin. So welcome everyone to State Partnerships that Advance Creative Placemaking, co-hosted by the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies, or NASAA, and the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations, or NACEDA. My name is Jeremy Brownlee. I'm the membership director at NACEDA, and I'm really happy to welcome you to this hour together, and we're in for a great conversation of a dynamic duo in Pennsylvania. I want to start with a little bit of housekeeping. As some of you have heard me say already, this is a big Zoom room, and you are all muted, and that's the way we want it to stay so that we can hear loud and clear from our presenters. To zoom in on those who are speaking, there should be a button for you to click speaker view, and that will make the person who is speaking largest in your screen. And then it will shift between the speakers automatically. Again, though you're muted, we want to hear from you. If you have questions as the discussion goes along, I want you to send that as a private chat. So at the bottom of your screen, you'll see there's a chat icon, and then there's a drop down in the two. And you'll find someone who is conveniently named questions, and that is our colleague Eric Giles of NASAA, who will be taking questions. If you have a question, please say where you're coming from. So get a little bit of geographic context, you might say, hi, I'm Jeremy from DC, and this is my question, just so we can get a sense of where some of the questions are coming from. Otherwise, we hope you really enjoy this conversation, and I don't want to take too much housekeeping, although I'll remind you about the questions again when we get into the main show. And now I want to turn it over to Kelly Bardstad, who's the Chief Program and Planning Officer at NASAA, and Frank Woodruff, the Executive Director at NECEDA, to give you all a little bit of framing context for this conversation that we're going to listen to today. So Kelly?
Thanks, Jeremy, and hello to everyone. I am really stoked about the turnout for today's conversation. It's great to see that it has struck a chord for so many of you. Want to start by sharing just a little bit about NASAA. All 56 states and jurisdictions have a government agency that is dedicated to the arts, from Hawaii to Maine to Guam to Puerto Rico and everywhere in between. If you are a community development organization anywhere in the nation, you have a state arts agency that's there to serve you and the communities that you also serve. State arts agencies have a public mandate to make the arts more accessible to everyone. They support the arts as an asset to nourish the economy, to nourish education, public spaces, public health, community life. And they do this through funding, about 23,000 grants every year. And they also provide technical assistance, training, networking support, and a variety of other services. They also have a special commitment to serving populations who historically have trouble accessing and obstacles to accessing resources. That includes rural communities, low-income families, people of color, older adults, veterans, people with disabilities. So NASAA is really honored to serve as their professional association. We work at our national level to amplify what they do at the state level. And our collaboration with NECEDA is a really great example of that. Another great example of that is our partnership with ArtPlace America. ArtPlace has been a wonderful, wonderful colleague to NASAA in our work with community arts development and creative placemaking with state arts councils. We're really happy to have our ArtPlace Senior Program Officer, Lila Tamari, on the line with us today, as well as several other ArtPlace colleagues. So everybody do a big wave to our ArtPlace sponsors and friends. Thank you so much. Big thanks to them for not only supporting this conversation, but also for encouraging our connection with Nishita, which has grown into a really fun and a really fruitful collaboration. And I think we've got a link in the chat for those of you who aren't familiar with ArtPlace if you want to check out some more about them. So NASAA and NACEDA have been doing some great work together at this intersection of arts and community development. We know, both through research and also the lived experiences of so many places across the country, that the arts are kind of a superfood in helping people and helping places to thrive. Something really special happens when community development and arts development join forces. Both gain more traction, communities start to flourish, and a lot of new opportunities begin to sprout. And so NASAA and Nishita have been working together to take a look at examples of how to catalyze that at the state level and to ask what we can do to help, which brings me around to today's conversation. Earlier this year, NASAA and Nishita had the chance to talk with Sarah Merritt and Pam Bridgeforth about what they are doing together in Pennsylvania. We learned a ton from them in a really short time. They are each really dedicated to their respective missions, but their relationship has helped them open doors and bring new knowledge and resources to bear on behalf of the communities that they serve. Plus, they are just brilliant women who are great to talk with. I don't know if gladdened is a word, but I can tell you that that's exactly how I felt when I hung up the phone after talking with Pam and with Sarah. Bottom line is that NASAA and Necedah found this Pennsylvania story to be really informative and really inspiring. And so we thought we'd share, and that's what we're going to do today. And we hope you feel the same way. So that's a little bit about NASAA, but I also want to make sure that the arts folks here online with us get to know Nishita as well before we dive in. So for that, I'll turn it over to Frank Woodruff, Executive Director of Nishita. Frank?
Thanks, Kelly. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see so many friendly faces. NACEDA, the National Alliance of Community Economic Development Associations. Our mission is to lead the community development field and its partners in shaping and influencing strategies that advance community prosperity. We're a membership-based organization. Our membership are statewide and regional network organizations of community development, corporations, and other community-based organizations that perform community development activities across their respective states. We have 40 members in 25 states in the District of Columbia. So NACEDA, we're an alliance of other state and regional associations. And so those 40 network organizations touch about 4,000 community-based development nonprofits across the country. And that's a big number. Unlike NASAA, we do not have a member in every state. There is a map of our membership that is going up in the chat now. However, if you are in a state that does not have a NACEDA member, that doesn't mean NACEDA doesn't have relationships there. And so if we can, regardless of whether we have a member there, does not prevent you from making a relationship. Ultimately, our primary constituency are community-based organizations that have place-based missions. Those organizations develop affordable housing and provide home ownership opportunities in the places in which they serve. They support small businesses, commercial corridor redevelopment, and a range of other activities, basically serve the needs of the place in which they have a mission. The neighborhood often is where they serve. And increasingly, arts and cultural strategy for community engagement, lifting community voices that are typically marginalized, ignored, or unheard, is a strategy that these organizations have been undertaking. And our goal at NACEDA, along with our statewide and regional membership organizations, is to through this work is to create a supportive statewide environment for creative placemaking work, arts and culture, and community development that advances racial equity and community prosperity, to create a supportive environment for that work at the statewide level. Since 2015, NACEDA went through a period where we explored this work. We went through a period where we reflected about how powerful creative placemaking can be as a strategy to advance equity, enhance social cohesion, and harness neighborhood visioning. Upon that, we applied that reflection to our network organizations to realize that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to improve the state level environment for how this work happens. It's not happening anywhere else. other than within the work of NACEDA and NASAA, and a small handful of other organizations. And so in some ways, it's kind of scary in that this has never been done before. And we're going to and we have a lot of responsibility for that. And that's a little bit scary. On the other hand, it's really exciting, especially in this moment where there's such a need for these kinds of tools in the communities that we serve. There's a real need. And we have a chance to make sure that happens. And so we launched the initiative more or less with a co-authoring of an article in the San Francisco Federal Reserve article that was published in November. And that article was a chance for NASA and NACEDA to really put our heads together to say, what does the environment look like right now at the state level? What are the gaps and how can we improve it? And what are some strategies? And we laid out a bit of a test, right? A document that says, hey, this is what we think, what do you think? And that's the stage where we're at. And so, obviously the reason that NACEDA wanted to participate with NASA in this webinar and everything we've done with each other the last year and a half is because if NACEDA and our members want to improve the state environment for this work, the state arts agencies are obviously a really critical piece of that. And so that brings us to today, our partnership in this webinar. It's our first official bringing together of our members, I think. And what I'm hoping to take away from today's conversation, I'm going to signpost some of the things maybe to watch for, is that you're going to hear from our dynamic duo of presenters as Kelly introduced them. I want you to look for how they initially built their relationship, how they brought together their stakeholders and members and other partners, how they've advanced policy work at the statewide and regional level, and hopefully apply those lenses to your work in your state. And after this webinar, you can expect to hear a little bit more from NACEDA and AFTA. NACEDA, we have our virtual conference coming up in October. We're going to be talking a lot about this work. We are planning an additional webinar with NASA later this fall. And more than anything, I speak for both NASA and NACEDA to say that we hope you're inspired by what you hear from Pennsylvania. You get some ideas, and we are both organizations are here to enthusiastically help make introductions, give ideas for conversation starters, and more. But we want you to know we're here to help. So reach out to us. And I think that pretty much concludes my piece of this. I'll pass it back to Jeremy to get to the real meat of why we're here.
Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Kelly, for that context. And I'll do a quick reminder of the housekeeping. Again, we're going to hear from this dynamic duo, two great individuals and a great relationship. And if you have questions of our presenters, please drop those into the chat. Send them as a private message to questions. You can use the to drop down to send, or if you see questions in the video field, you can click on the 3 buttons and send a chat. We have a few people joining us by phone. Don't worry, we haven't forgotten about you. When it gets to question time, there will be some opportunities for phone questions as well. And I also just want to say one more thing, to watch the chat for messages from Thomas Young, who is our tech support today, who is dropping those links and important resources that Frank, Kelly, and Pam and Sarah will be talking about. So be sure to watch out for those. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Sarah and Pam. And I want to tell you a little bit about them before we get going into this conversation. So Sarah Merritt is the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts Director of Creative Communities, a program that supports art-based community and economic development projects that focus on deep community engagement, authentic artist inclusion, and strong community partnerships. Previously, Sarah served as Executive Director of the Arts Council of Wayne County, ACWC, in Goldsboro, North Carolina. In that role, she led the ACWC through an extensive reorganization to fully serve the county's diverse civilian and military populations. From 2009 to 2017, she served on the Board of Directors of Arts North Carolina, the state's arts advocacy agency, where she led the 2015 to 2020 Strategic Planning Committee and served as board chair in 2016. In addition to her arts administration, advocacy, and community development work, Sarah has experience as an educator, a small business owner, and a residential and commercial real estate broker. She holds a bachelor's degree in art history from the University of Maryland University College and a Master of Science in Arts Administration from Drexel University. So join me in some silent snaps or waves welcoming to Sarah. And I would like to also introduce Pamela Bridgeforth. Pam is Director of Programs for the Philadelphia Association of Community Development Corporations, or PACDC. Pam oversees PACDC's member services programs and launched its Community Development Leadership Institute, which provides training and technical assistance for nonprofit practitioners working to advance equitable neighborhood revitalization. In addition to leading arts and community initiatives in collaboration with member organizations, artists, and arts organizations, she convenes workshops on the subject and produced a toolkit in the 2018 edition of PACDC's magazine entitled Art, Equity, and Place, Creating Neighborhood Health, Happiness, and Well-Being with Art. Pam is currently in the inaugural cohort of the National Practice of Change Fellowship Program in Placemaking at Arizona State University. Join me in, again, waving welcome to Pam. And so now we're going to hear a little bit from Pam and Sarah about their relationship. And I want to open the floor to the both of you. And first, start at the very beginning and ask, how did you first connect with each other? And if you know, had your organizations worked with each other prior to you two connecting?
Pam, do you want me to start or do you want to start?
I think so, yes. Yes, you start. We're here because of you, my friend. So you start.
Oh, not quite, but so I am actually a couple of weeks away from approaching my third work anniversary with the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. I started in August of 2017, and we were going through a leadership transition at the time. And when our new executive director came on, Carl Blischka, he asked me if I would serve as the staff lead for the information gathering process for our next strategic plan, our 2019-2024 strategic plan. And I happily said I would do it because I'd been through the process, as you heard, in North Carolina for our state arts advocacy organization. And so I was very excited because I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, but married to the military, so lived all over the place for a long time. And I was just coming back to PA. So I thought this would be a great opportunity for me to get a chance to get to know my state that I consider home. So one of the components of our information gathering process was a series of community conversations across the state. And from my work in community in North Carolina, I knew how important it was to really hear from people outside of the arts sector. So as we invited people to join these conversations, we were very intentional to include community development organizations, local government, healthcare, higher education, K through 12, kind of you name it, social justice, community service organizations. And for me, it was a great opportunity really to get a deep dive into a community and find out who these key stakeholders were, these people that we could really learn a lot from. And so as I planned the Philadelphia community conversation, I was told to connect with the PACDC and Pam. Unfortunately, she couldn't come to our community conversation because she was, I think maybe you were in Arizona at the time, Pam, I can't remember, but you weren't there. But a representative, Zakiya Hall, came and in Pam's place and just heard a lot of great information about what communities were looking for from their state arts agency and how we could possibly support them, the challenges and opportunities that they were confronting. So fast forward, we finished that process in the fall of 2018 and began working on our strategic plan. And we knew right away that there was going to be place for a creation of my program, Creative Communities, that supports arts-based community and economic development. So as I started thinking about that and planning, I reached out to Pam because I was I've started traveling to Philly a lot. And so pretty much every time I was coming to Philly, I would call Pam and say, hey, can we find time to get together? And can I run these ideas by you? And so that's how it started. And, here we are now. So Pam, do you want to?
Yes, Sarah's absolutely right. I will say wait a minute, can y'all hear me? Is there, okay.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, it had always been, I started with PACDC, well, let me take a step back. I want to say a shout out to some folks who I know. I'm like, my friend Sylvia at the Arizona Housing Coalition, I believe she had registered, I don't know if she's on this call right now. Mariette Eileen from New Jersey State Arts Council, I want to say, hey, Mary Eileen, how you doing? Darren Barker, my dear friend, colleagues at the sister agency in New Jersey, I want to say, hey. Hey, Lila from Art Place. Hey.
Yes. Hey,
and Liz Crane also from Art Place. I was just so glad when we got the RSVP list, these folks were there because we've been kind of walking through this process at PACDC with these individuals who were so kind enough to allow me to come sit in their offices or participate with them on a program, and it's really it's very encouraging to see them here also as part of this dialogue. Thank you for joining us. Just to kind of go back to what I was originally saying, when I came to PACDC close to like almost 11, 12 years ago, 2007, I had left the position in New Jersey running an arts organization in Camden, New Jersey. And I knew from that work that the Arts Council there was a dynamic resource for not just artists, but for community that was underutilized by a lot of folks that were not the traditional arts organizations and arts or so it was always my goal and plan since 2007 to try to connect in a very intimate way with the Pennsylvania State Council on the Arts, because I knew that they also had similar resources that were heretofore not as used or utilized by our constituency. But in figuring that out over the course of almost a decade, it was like hit or miss, right? But one thing I knew for sure was that many of our members, and I would say out of the broad, roster of our members, some of the most effective, highly entrepreneurial, incredibly crafty, amazingly connected community-based organizations were already partnering and doing work with Pennsylvania State Council on the Arts. So I was like, oh, wow, so y'all already are doing this, right? So how can I support this work? And so, trying to amplify it through publications, through programming. And when Sarah outreached to us, I think I was on sabbatical at the time that Sarah initially outreached to us. And I was very reluctant. I was like, oh man, we don't have our stuff together. We don't know what I'm gonna say to them. What could I do? But to Sarah's credit, she was persistent, and we circled back with each other. I made a point to make sure that our publication that highlighted a lot of our members' work in this space was addressed directly to the council members, because council members are tremendously dynamic individuals in and of their own rights, and are a tremendous resource of connectors and networkers. And I wanted very much those council members to be connected to our members' work. So it was really vital for me to be able to make that connection. And then, over the course of the years that we have been working together, just kind of checking in with each other. And, like I said, Sarah comes to my office, and Sarah serves on our conference planning committee. The Arts Council is a co-sponsor of our conference conversations this year, first time ever. And it's really helping us to think, I don't want to say differently, but more with a wider lens. Because one of the things that I've seen in community development work, and our members and the network of members across the country, they are extraordinary people, and they're doing amazing things with very little resources and under the cover of darkness. But in doing that, they tend to think with their heads down. And so it's our responsibility as associations of our members to always be looking for opportunities to give them that horizon view, say, wait a minute, you're working hard, but there's some other folks over here that maybe if you align with them, maybe your job might not be as hard, right? Not only for the work itself, right? Because the work has to get done, but also for the whole reason why you got into the work too, right? Is that personal enrichment of being connected to somebody who cares similarly the way you care and is willing to roll up your sleeves and do the work that needs to happen to make the world a little bit better. So, so on a twofold level, it's one, to get the work done, but also to enrich your personal portfolio of who you are as a human being functioning in the world. I'm sorry, I get a little preachy on that, so sorry.
That's great.
Yeah, we're here to testify. So thank you both for that introduction. And Pam, I think you alluded to some of the things I want to ask about next with that sponsorship in your conferences, but want to dig into a little bit and hear from each of you how your organizations work together now. And now that we've learned a little bit about how you first started meeting each other and the conversations you've been having formally, what are some of the ways you're working together these days?
Sarah, do you want to talk about the financing piece that you all?
Yeah, I can.
I think that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I think. Well, one of the things I think I alluded to this in the beginning was when I was working on creating the Creative Communities program, and I was traveling to Philly about once a month, sometimes more. I'd make a point to stop in and see Pam, like I said. And so throughout that whole process of thinking everything through, she was one of the first people to see drafts of the guidelines as we moved through it. So she's really pivotal to what the Creative Communities program is, and I'm very proud of that program. So thank you, Pam, if I have never said that. But as we were working through, action items for our strategic plan, our executive director, who has a background, well, he's got an arts background, but also a background in economic development in the state of Florida. One of the ideas that he put forth was thinking about creating some kind of a creative entrepreneurs of own program. And so we started those discussions. I think it was last winter, would have been winter of 2019, I believe. Time has flown by so fast. And the first person we called was Pam. And we went to Philadelphia. She assembled, I think, what was it, 4 or 5 different CDFI representatives. So Finanta, I can't remember all of them, but we had a really great meeting, talked about what our thoughts were, and went away to think about it. They had some great questions. And, long story short, we're in the process of getting something together. I think things have, of course, as what they have with everybody, kind of slowed down and even come to a standstill as we work through this pandemic crisis. But we're back to the discussion table, and so hopefully something will come along. We'll be able to announce something. So that was a great. It's a really great example of what our relationship with Pam and PACDC has helped us do.
I will follow that up by saying, firstly, every time Sarah would come to my office, she always looked fly as heck, and had this really cool leather backpack. And you gotta give a workshop girl on that, just that, how you look fly, going all over the state, driving. I don't know how you do that. It's like every time. But outside of that, I will say that we invited Sarah to participate as part of our last year's conference. And she came to a tour that we did with
Yes.
several of our members in South Philadelphia. And the organization that they toured had been talking to them about their work, talking to Sarah about their work, and they applied to the initiative that Sarah led. And they're one of 5, they're a member organization, one of 4 organizations in the entire state to be part of that initial cohort. And that's, it's a pilot program. And, Sarah, I know, is working really hard to try to make it inculcated into the ongoing programming of PCA. But I was incredibly excited and proud to even just, say, hey, check out these folks is an opportunity for a very, this is an immigrant services organization, right? That's their CMAC is an immigrant services organization. They are not an arts organization by any stretch. They are community rooted, community grassroots organizers. Many of the people that they serve are undocumented. Some of them have been, subject to tremendous abuse and just going through a lot of things to get to this country and stay in this country and live and flourish. And not only are they serving this immigrant community in South Philadelphia, but they're also serving by the concentric circle of how community development works, the folks that are interconnected with them. So they're, providing services, you have young Asian kids doing hip hop rap activities with Black kids and Hispanic kids. And, to see them do this work, I get a little emotional about it because it's just tremendous to me. To see them do that work in the face of the crapola that we are facing right now. And they are arm and shoulder with each other, irregardless of the color of their skin or the language that they speak. Extraordinary. You have the State Arts Council saying, hey, you know what? We see what you're doing, and we want to invest in you in a way that is that can be pivotal to change the access to resources and the awareness of what you do on a statewide way. So I was very, very excited about that. I will also say that by having Sarah and Carl, and I believe several times, they've actually brought a PCA council person to our office. That was tremendous to say, oh, wow, PCA is coming today, to just, talk with us and, just brainstorm with us about the work that we are doing and our members are doing. And that, I will say, since 2007, I've been trying to, I don't want to say turn the wheel, but, get, our stakeholders, our board and, my executive leadership to kind of be thinking differently about this partnership with artists and to have them, commit that time and that those resources to us in terms of walking with us in this journey. We really view them, and Sarah, we view PCA in general, but Sarah in particular as a thought partner with us as we think about community development, not only in the kind of check the boxes of everyday activity, but like, how do we solve for the problems that our members are actually working on in a way that is meaningful? So, and by no means are we anywhere near coming to resolution, but the fact that we're opening the tent for this work so that you have other folks also thinking about it is I think, a really incredibly important approach to solving these tremendous problems.
Thank you both. I think that gives a lot of additional context. And, I think we can see the fruit of the relationship that you have. And want to ask a similar question, kind of flipped oppositely, and go one at a time with each of you. So for Sarah, how has your relationship with Pam influenced work that you do that doesn't include PACDC and Pam? So work you're doing in Pittsburgh or in rural Pennsylvania or other projects that don't involve Pam. How has she stretched or pushed you, or what have you learned that has influenced other work?
Well, I think, the big, the headline is that, having this great relationship with Pam and learning all the wonderful things that I have has really highlighted and solidified to me the importance of having these relationships across the state. And, so one of the things that Pam has been really great with me with, kind of in my introduction to Philadelphia and neighborhoods and the different various groups that she works with is just being very honest and open about the challenges and opportunities that communities are facing, and about what, kind of where the PCA can align its policy with what the PACDC's work. And so, yeah, I think the main thing is just, it really highlights that in order to do really good work in this area, you have to have these relationships. You cannot do it in a silo. You have to be able to go into a community and work hand in hand, like arm in arm, and let the community development people, because this work isn't driven by, I mean, sure, we support it, but it's community driven, as you said in the beginning. That's one of the main goal of you know, the Creative Communities program, is that it's community driven. So it's really only natural. So Pam has just been really great in just continuing to highlight to me the importance of this relationship.
Thank you, Sarah. And Pam, I'm going to put the same question to you. How have your interactions and relationship with Sarah influenced the work that you do that doesn't directly work with the PCA or with Sarah, other work that you do?
So I think it's definitely evidence and proof positive that by starting small and very informal, that you can really build some powerful opportunities. And so it's helping me to get some energy and some movement behind trying to initiate some other partnerships with other potentially unusual suspects in community development. So for me, you know, we had an outreach several months ago from somebody, just a random outreach from somebody who's in the district attorney's office here in Philadelphia. And typically community development agencies don't necessarily work explicitly with district attorney's offices, right? They either work with police because they're dealing with a safety issue, or yeah, that's the only real way that they do that. But this particular individual outreached to me saying, hey, you know, what if we, you know, try to come up with some ideas and programming? And it was like, initially I was like, oh, well, what could we possibly do? None of our members are really, you know, providing any kind of support for adjudicated young people or even adjudicated adults. But then I was like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, most of them are working in communities where people are coming out. A lot of people are coming back returning citizens. And what happens to them? And I know for a fact also that we know that there are a lot of returning citizens that really want to get into the idea of or work in the areas of community development, whether it's something as simple as, you know, providing some support for cleaning and safety of a commercial corridor, to something a little bit more sophisticated where they're thinking about how do we provide housing for people coming out of prisons. So really got kind of stepping into that and trying to build a relationship. Similarly, you know, it starts off with, you know, personal connections, you know, finding similar things that your organizations are aligned to and trying to build on that. And I'm hoping that we will actually develop some real programming, because I know we have several members that will be prime targets for that kind of a collaboration. I think also, you know, exploring more partnerships with LGBT service providers, which community development heretofore has not really been a significant player in. And we know that population is growing strong and needs a tremendous lot of resources and support that our community development sector can actually provide. Many organizations, I know in our particular portfolio, are beginning to do some small programming, but it's very tiny and very nascent at this point, and we need to change that as a sector. So thinking about ways in which we can build those relationships and develop programming and resources to support those relationships. And so that's kind of like the immediate things, right? But the more longer term things, things that relate to immediately to the work that PACDC is doing right now, is my partnership with Sarah, I think, is helping to deepen our existing art and community development work. In addition to the workshops and technical assistance programs that we run, we are also running actual live programming. We received some grants, some money from the National Endowment for the Arts to actually build on the programming that we've done to date and actually introduce new curricula and introduce another round of programming in this area. So thinking about how we take that curricula, how we take what we've learned about how our members and the people who they work with on a regular, everyday basis are thinking about arts and thinking about creative thinking as part of their neighborhood planning and strategizing and visioning for implementing real change at the neighborhood level. And thinking about ways in which we document that and then find more resources to support it in a meaningful way. And not just one-off grants, right? I'm talking about the way that we support real estate development is the same way that we need to find resources for arts and community development collaborations.
Thank you both. And I think those are some great responses about how your work has been influenced by each other. And I want to explore a little bit now how your thinking has been influenced by each other. You know, you each separately have kind of referred to the work, right? And I think all of us who are involved in the work bring a lot of personal experience and a lot of values and commitments for what the work is, and, you know, can talk for hours on end about it. But I want to unpack a little bit about what that means for each of you, and how you've influenced each other. And our last question before we move to the Q&A section. So I want to just ask, you know, maybe a 2-minute response of, you know, how have you expanded or challenged each other's understanding of either creative placemaking or the intersection of arts and community development? What has been a mind expander from the relationship that you've had with each other?
This is a tough one.
Especially with the time constraint, I know.
It's a tough one only because I think that the other fortunate thing for me that I find really wonderful is that Pam's doing this community development work, but she has an arts background. So it's a tough question for me to answer because I'm preaching to the choir when I preach to Pam. Pam, I'll let you talk for a minute because I'm trying to think.
I don't know, my 10-year-old just introduced me to this concept of, mind bombs. And like, Jeremy, you just gave a mind bomb to me, like a logic bomb. I'm like, damn, I don't know how to answer that, John. I would say, I guess the most aha moment for me was the fact that the PCA was willing to do this. They were willing to listen. They were willing to keep their ears open. Carl, when he would come to the office and talk to us, I knew he didn't have a big pocketbook. I mean, he's head of the PCA, right? So he has a pocketbook, but the pocketbook is money's already spent. But the fact that you have somebody with a pocketbook who's like, okay, I'm coming to your table, tell us about what you're doing. I want to know. Like, what? Who does that? Nobody does that. Very few people. I don't know of. I'm trying to think of the sea of funders that I've engaged with on a regular basis. The very few executive directors of major institutions come to an organization and say, hey, what's going on? I don't have no money right now, but tell me what's going on. And that to me was like, what?
That's where we're very fortunate.
Yeah, that's a logic.
He understands that, so we don't have to convince him.
Yeah, so that's a logic bomb. But I know in other communities that's not the case, and I'm not saying that other communities, you know, aren't thinking and aren't, you know, being innovative in their approaches. But the mere fact that you have a willingness to sit down at the table with somebody to say, hey, what are you doing? And tell me about it. And that is not necessarily a grantee or would ever be a grantee. Think about that. That's wow. And I would say also from the perspective of community developers, you know, to be willing to listen, you know, and it's been hard sometimes for me to get a community development entity to sit down with an artist or even sit down with me and talk about like, okay, what are you doing and around engagement, or what are you doing around this issue that you have around safety? And you know, are there some partners maybe that you could bring or connect you to that could maybe help you think differently about that? And that's like a big thing, right? To think you can put your own agenda away for a minute to hear someone else's agenda and or just hear what they're working with and hear about what they're trying to accomplish. And listen, and not say that you're willing to like write any checks or that you're willing to jump into a program with them, but just really listen to where they're coming from and say, oh, okay, there could be some opportunities to maybe learn. I didn't understand that was the issues. I didn't understand that those were the obstacles. Maybe there's some opportunity for us to think about how we do this a little differently. So that to me still is a mind blower that we still have to go back to the basics in all of this, no matter how sophisticated our work is. We still have to go back to the basics of, you know, being willing to be open to another person's ideas, another actor's struggles, to figure out like, you know, hey, I'm here to listen, and maybe we can figure out some ways to help each other.
Thank you. Thank you both. And we have a little bit of time for some questions. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Eric Giles from NASA, who's going to be a different voice asking you all some questions here for the next few minutes. Eric?
Thanks, Jeremy. Thank you, Pam and Sarah. I have had a few questions come through in the queue. I'm going to get to that just in a second. I want to acknowledge that a few of those questions have been about, if my state doesn't have a NACEDA member in it, how do we go about finding out who we can reach out to in our state? Jeremy's going to address that in his wrap up, so we don't need to cover that in this session. First thing I'd like to do is just pause for a couple seconds to let those of you who have dialed in only via the phone to ask a question. If you have dialed in only on the phone, just hit *6 to unmute your phone, and this is your time to ask your question directly. All right, hearing no one unmute their phone, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I will do that again at the end of Q&A, just in case something comes up during the space of time between now and then. The first question I have is for both Pam and Sarah. I'm going to start with Sarah, and then Pam, I'll have you go afterwards. So we know that NASA and NACEDA are looking to connect folks in their networks who don't currently know each other and work together. Are there a couple of things, the first couple of things you'd advise others to do in order to get to know each other?
Well, I think, if you're starting from scratch, like I was, because I was new to the state, back to the state, do your research, talk to your colleagues, talk to people that that live, in the community or have some kind of connection with them. But do your homework and then just reach out. And, like Pam said, we started out very informally, just really coming to introduce I think Carl came with me the first time too. We introduced ourselves and talked about, what we were thinking about with our strategic plan and just started a conversation. I think if you go into it just with a getting to know you kind of attitude and not with an agenda, that's really the key. At least for us, it was, I think.
Pam, do you have anything to add?
I would say in all of this work, from a perspective of a membership association, this work has been led and predicated on the work that already exists by our members. And so one of the first things I discovered when I arrived was that there was this little tiny organization called ICPIC. It's like the Islamic Cultural, oh my God, I can't remember. I'm terrible with acronyms. But essentially it's this little tiny storefront in West Philly. And it's run by this man, Brother Abdul, who is amazing. He is just amazing. And he's been running this Islamic Cultural Center now for probably 15, 20 plus years out of his own retirement savings, right? Like very limited. But one of the things he lists as a grant, as a one of the few organizations that fund his work was Placemaking Council on the Arts. I was like, what? So I figured, wow, if Placemaking Council on the Arts is funding Brother Abdul to do work in West Philly on Baltimore Avenue, let me, I got to figure out some way to get out with these folks. So, and I think he's like one of maybe half dozen or so organizations, of both large and small, who receive money from this, from the state organization dedicated to funding high quality arts programming in the state. So, following your members and following who's supporting their work, following who they are partnering with is how you find, that's how you get the crumbs, that's the bread seeds on the ground to help build the map, right? For how you build on incremental ways outreaches, right? Finding, looking at your members, where they're getting their resources from, where they're doing their partnerships at, and saying, hey, what's going on? Can I come down and hang with y'all for a little bit? In figuring out from there, like what makes sense in terms of, who else are you aligned with and how can I connect with them? Before you know it, you start getting a little bit of you start building a network of folks that are like-minded, that know about what it is that you're trying to accomplish. They're like, hey, we got this idea, would you be interested in it? And the next thing you know, you might be somewhere doing some extraordinary things that you had never imagined that you would be doing. But always, 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 always start off with people who are right with you at the ground level. So from a membership association, our members, and from the state association, the state grant organizations, I would say your grantees, right? They're already in these organizations and have amazing partnerships. And just hanging out with, a program that has these partnerships in place, and seeing who's coming to the table and seeing how they're planning and seeing how they're working, that can get your juices running and your open up networks for you to connect in with what they're doing and also connect into other ways. So follow your members, follow your grantees. It will lead you where you need to be.
That's a good
Great.
point.
Thank you both. Pam, I have a question for you that's come through. Too often arts are cast as a nicety rather than necessity, especially given other pressing community needs. What's your response to that, and how do you make the case to people in the economic development and housing sectors to include the arts as part of their discussion in that?
So, so now my long battle since 2007 when I was at a board meeting with our board of directors and started talking to them about arts and community, and their eyes started to glaze over. And I could see it. I could see the, like when you're trying to do a presentation and you're dying, like, oh man, it ain't working. Well, lo and behold, 10 years later, our board president, Maria Gonzalez, who does not suffer fools gladly. She is a serious, serious Latina. Was talking to a major international funder in our boardroom and talking almost exclusively about their arts and community work. I want to give you, I want to let you know, I didn't have anything to do with that. But the mere fact that you have this woman who knows how to do multi-million-dollar deals, housing deals, talking to international funder about how an artist using art was transforming how people were connecting with each other in a meaningful way. This is in a community who was facing opioid crisis. They were literally sweeping dead people off the street. He's talking about art in that way. So I say that, in the face of everything that has gone on, certainly in the last, since January, right? The world has flipped over on its head. And the way that we've done things in the past, we cannot continue to do. We won't be allowed to be able to do, right? For the fact that, one, there's no money to do it the way that we used to do. And two, the moral imperative is stronger than ever for us to be thinking differently. So where else would you be doing it differently than to partner with somebody who is like, we can work together, we can figure this out. It is I believe art is, incorporating arts approaches and creative approaches is among our last best bet to get people to a table that otherwise would never be in a room together.
Yep.
I really believe that with all my heart and soul. And so it's imperative on us, for the people who are a part of the converted, right, the churchgoers, to be evangelizing that every single time. Somebody says to you, oh, well, arts and culture is, but what else? What's your alternative? To continue to fail now or not do as well? Come on now, we can do better.
Well said.
Thank you, Pam. Unfortunately, it looks like we have run out of time for Q&A. For those who have sent me a question, I will pass it along to both Pam, Sarah, Jeremy, Frank, and Kelly. So I guess it's more than just two people, to make sure it gets answered. Also, we'll be sharing Pam and Sarah's emails in a follow-up email tomorrow. So if something occurs to you between now and then, feel free to email them. They've generously offered to allow us to pass on their contact information, and love receiving your calls and emails. I'm going to pass things back to Jeremy now so he can wrap things up for us today.
Thank you, Eric. And Pam and Sarah, I have one request of you all. Can you, in the upper right on your screen, click on gallery view so you can see all of us? And I want to ask everyone to join me again in waves and silent claps, blown kisses, whatever, snaps, whatever you want to do to thank Pam and Sarah for this wonderful conversation that you allowed us to be a part of.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
And I have 3 quick housekeeping announcements for everyone, and we'll try to be done by the hour. Number one, again, this conversation has been recorded, and part of that follow-up email you will be getting will include the recording, so you can to revisit this wonderful conversation time and again, as much as your well-loved novel that you thumb through
Time
all
and
the
again.
time. Secondly, that question that Eric mentioned about if your state doesn't have a NACEDA member, feel free to reach out to NACEDA anyway. We have connections in lots of states. It may not be a statewide entity, but it will be somebody in the community development sector that we can work to connect you to. Also, would point you to, in that spirit of within the state government interconnection, many states have community development agencies in one way or another. They can be an avenue for you to learn about the grassroots organizations also. We'll want to, from Nishita and NASAA's point of view, I want to thank you all for joining us today, and note that we will have another co-hosted webinar in the fall, so be alert to our communications about that. It's not yet scheduled, but it will be coming down the pike, so stay alert for that. And finally, one final announcement for the NASAA Community Arts staffers. Those of you who are part of the Community Arts Peer Group, NASAA is also offering a virtual convocation to talk more about the arts, equity, placemaking, and community development. And you can contact Eric for more details about that. So lots of programming coming up. And just again, a hearty thank you for Pam and Sarah and all of you for your time to join us for this hour and this great conversation. So thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.